Good day, duelists. So the 41st IDC tournament has just finished and I placed 3rd with this deck right here, which is 40 card Fortress Burn. And I want to try out something new for the channel and do a bit of a tournament report. In this video I'll be going over the deck itself and why it's interesting, and in the next video I'll go over all the matches, interesting plays that happened and what I learned from each of them. I was originally going to make this video only if I'd won, but I have a lot of thoughts I wanted to share about the deck and how it performed, so 3rd place is good enough, figured I'll make it anyway. Before we start, disclaimer number 1, there's a lot of takes that I'll have in this video that might be controversial, so it's okay to disagree. And disclaimer number 2, this video will be hyper-focused on the competitive Duel Master scene, which is not what I usually do on this channel, but don't worry, more unboxing and structured deck duels and top 10 lists and whatnot are coming soon as well. So anyway, why is this deck so interesting and how did we get to it? Well, for the people outside of the IDC community, I feel like I need to set the stage with a little story. In the Western rendition of the Duel Masters TCG, as opposed to the Japanese version, there is no maximum deck size. Your deck can in theory have 500 cards if you so desire. But that would not be a very good idea. In card games in general, the smaller the deck size, the more often you will be drawing your key cards, because there's less other cards to draw. This concept is called consistency. The minimum deck size in Duel Masters is 40 cards, so in principle you want to have as close to that number as possible. Despite this, historically many decks have run 42, 43, even more cards, sacrificing some consistency in order to have more options available in the deck. I think this peaked with a deck called Phobos Control. In short, the point of this type of list is to turn your deck into a toolbox with easy access to every tool in it. And because it's important for your toolbox to be large, to have access to tools for every situation, and because you have consistent access to them anyway, it made sense to run more than 40 cards in this type of deck. So people eventually landed on a nice round 50, and over time that became the standard. And the thing is, other decks had to follow suit to keep up. You want to play Ruby deck out? Well, you have to play 50 cards, or you ought to lose to decks that do. And control decks in general started to value late game options over early game consistency because they had to in order to keep up. And so it became a bit of an unwritten rule that control decks must run 50 cards. So when this meta-breaking deck came around called Fortress Burn, being a control deck itself, of course the norm was and still is today that it had to run 50 cards. And it made sense. After all, you needed room for the full ramp and burn package and options to deal with opponents' threats like Miraculous Snare or Holy Awe, or Fighter Dual Fang to destroy big boys, or even more blockers like Juliana, etc. You just cannot fit all of that in a 40 card package, you have to give up some consistency. Fast forward to a little over a year ago, a young and inexperienced Mr. Bazat joins the IDC community. And when I joined, I absolutely hated the concept of 50 cards. I could just not wrap my head around it. My main argument against it was a probabilistic one. It's statistically unlikely that 50 cards is exactly optimal for a given deck, and not 49 or 51 or any other number. Same argument can of course be made for 40, but since 40 is the minimum, if the true optimum is 30 or 38 or 39 or whatever, then 40 is still optimal within the constraints of the game. So if you're running a 50 card deck, you pretty much have to accept that it's not optimal, and young IDC virgin Mr. Bazat could just not have that. And so I tried to build a 40 card fortress list. And how do you go about this? Well, you obviously can't give up the options you have against different matchups, so the only thing to do is to cut down on the burn package. After all, you are on 40 cards, so you should see those burn cards more consistently anyway. And with that in mind, I ended up with this list. Now, this list is absolutely fucking terrible. It runs Surfer instead of Spirals, it doesn't have energy streams, it's a bloody mess. And looking back at it is painful now, but the main takeaway remains that it retains all the options. It has snares to deal with muscular threats like Mistrias and Boli. It has a whole bunch of triggers including 4 pits, it can destroy things like Petrova with Holy Awe, and once you've ramped enough you can even clear things like Azonius or Arcadias with King Tsunami. But of course, in order to make room for these options while keeping maximal consistency, you needed to sacrifice some of the burn cards. So you see here, for example, there's only 3 of each Fortress, Plague and Faliga instead of 4, and there's even no energy stream to get those cards more reliably. And I think in general this is what most people imagine when thinking about 40 card Fortress. Not this list specifically again, this is absolute dogshit, but just conceptually, keeping most options while sacrificing a little on the burn package. Anyway, the deck itself underperformed, obviously. I tried it multiple times afterwards, but it just kept losing to 50 card control lists because it lacked that late game burn punch. So after some more attempts, I gave up on the idea and caved into the 50 card supremacy. Fast forward to 2024 and Finnish legend Sidelio, I'll link his YouTube channel down in the video description, drops this 40 card list as a thought experiment. Ignoring the 2 instead of 4 soul swaps, which is due to Finnish restrictions, the deck itself was special because it followed a different route. Consistency, options, burn. You can only have 2 out of the 3. We've seen options plus burn but lower consistency, which is the classic 50 card version, and we've seen consistency plus options but less burn in the previous experiments. But this deck just says fuck it to all options and focuses purely on burn and disruptions while maintaining consistency. And when I first saw this, my knee-jerk reaction was, there's no way this works. I mean, you have no options to deal with common cards. If a Petrova hits the board, there's literally nothing this deck can do to remove it. Not to mention things like Azonius or Arcadias. Even Mistrias is a problem because now there's no more Miraculous Snare. You cannot remove all options just like that. Or can you? And I was trying to have a conversation about this, but you know, talking to people online can be difficult, especially in group settings. Everyone's focusing on the wrong things, like, does this beat 50 card Fortress? People even started testing 40 versus 50 cards in direct duos, which is like, I guess this stems from the mentality of classic 40 card Fortress, which reduced the burn package. But in this version, you're not sacrificing anything that would hurt you against other Fortress decks, so that's not really the matchup you want to be testing. What you are really weakening yourself to, like I said before, is cards like Mistrias, Azonius, Arcadias, maybe even Deck Out or Hydro Hurricane decks. Anyway, raising points on Discord chats is hard, so I kinda left it as it is, though it was always something I kept in the back of my head. Fast forward a little bit more, and I meet Sidelio in real life at the Duel Masters Finland Mega Meet, and there we discuss more about this 40 card Fortress idea, and I'm getting more and more sold on it. So I eventually ended up on this list right here, which I decided to bring to IDC41. Let's discuss about the deck itself. Full burn package, -1 Faliga, which I would really love to have, but I think the only thing I could cut for it is maybe 1 Skysword, and I don't really feel like losing Rump plus Rush Defense. Other than that, there's a full playset of energy streams. I honestly consider this as part of the burn package itself now, because it allows you to play more burn cards at once when top decking. Other notable cards are Spiral Gate instead of Aqua Surfers. I think playing Surfer is just objectively wrong. Surfer is obviously better from shields, but playing Spiral Gate on turn 2 to buy time is still game winning against aggro, and against control you can use it to bounce back your Fortress shells, to replay them, and the versatility just makes Spiral Gate a clear winner. I also play one Morbid Medicine because, as I said in my top 10 Darkness cards video, no other single slot swings matchups as hard as this card. In general, playing against hard controls or deck out, this card, this one slot, just increases your win chance by absurd percentages. And I think the most contested slots might be the discard package. I was unsure of which cards to play here, but after some testing I ended up on 2 Clamps and 2 Lost Souls, and let me tell you, Cranium Clamp has been MVP this tournament. Having a response to the double ramp into Lost Soul line of play just proved critical, and even if they avoid charging the second time to play around Clamp, the threat of the Clamp itself has just forced the opponent to make a suboptimal play. Maybe you play Locomotiver instead of it to have a swap target and increase the trigger count, but for now at least I was very satisfied with how well Cranium Clamp performed. Another consideration is just taking all 4 of these out for the Clone Nightmare package, but I don't know about that, as Lost Soul has also been very good this tournament. So let's address the elephant in the room. How do you deal with things like Petrova, Elzonius or Arcadias? After all, there is no card in the deck that can get rid of them. Well, the short answer is that you don't. You just either burn or discard your opponent before these threats hit the board, which you can do more consistently seeing as you're on 40 cards, or you just ignore them and leave them be while dealing with everything else the opponent plays. After all, Elzonius can only attack once per turn. if you burn the opponent enough to the point where they can't play anything else, it's not that hard to generate one shield and or one blocker per turn and tank the attacks. It sounds counterintuitive to ignore the opponent's threats, but hey, if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, okay, you will lose some games, but every deck will lose some games once in a while. But overall in testing, and even during the tournament itself, things like Petrova just didn't feel threatening. A lonely Petrova with nothing else on board just doesn't hurt the deck at all. So that's pretty much it for the deck profile. I think I covered pretty much every card and why it's there. I didn't explicitly go over, okay, like Bronze Arm Tribe, you're obviously gonna have 4 of and such. One other thing to consider was maybe replacing one of the Belixes for the 5th Valiga, but in general, I don't really like having one-offs. So if I had one of Belix, maybe sometimes it's in shields, and even then it's not as reliable to get it, but it is a consideration to keep in mind. Overall, I was very satisfied with how the deck performed. It never really felt like I was in a hopeless match. It always felt like I had some chance, and even the games that I've lost, you'll see in the next video where I go over the matches, I lost mostly due to my own misplays. So I would encourage people to try out this deck, or at least some version of it. I think you will be surprised on how well it does. And that is the end of this video. Stay tuned for the next part, in which I will do the tournament report. I will go over my matches. There's a lot of interesting plays there and a lot of interesting things that happened and a lot of interesting lessons to learn about the deck itself and, Fortress Burn in general. So stay tuned and see you then. Take care.